welcome back to another Just 15 Minutes, or Mins. Still struggling with that. Anyway, it's another rambling video, and the FOMO monster, fear of missing out. The FOMO monster is getting larger and larger, isn't it? So what have we got today to make that FOMO monster a little bit bigger? Well, we're again jumping on the bandwagon like everybody, using a bit of DeepSeek R1, but locally. There's a lot of stuff out there about where it's hosted and all that sort of stuff. I get it, but the fact is anyway, is that a lot of this sort of stuff that you don't necessarily want to go out of your environment, especially, if you're doing this as a hobby sort of thing, it's, probably debatable if that's a problem. But certainly from a business perspective, even a small business perspective, you might want to control your own data. Thank you very much. And especially if you're possibly going to use RAG, Retrieve Augmented Generation. In other words, if you've got a spreadsheet or a PDF that you're passing to a large language model to extract data or do wonderful things with it, then you may have sensitive data in those documents and you don't want them to leak out to other systems. So what I'm about to show you is all running locally. And when I say locally, it could be run in your own company's servers or in your own environment on, say, Azure or AWS or Google, but at least you've got control. It's sort of ring fenced, I think is what I'm trying to say there. So what are we doing? Well, we're going to build, I tell you what, it's probably better to show you very quickly. I'm going to build a Visual Studio Code, which is open source, can be run on all the main platforms. And I've often been, to be honest, I haven't bothered looking even. When you look at like extensions, basically, you've got all these like Copilot and all these other types of things, haven't you? Well, what I'm about to do is a bit stupid, really, because there's so many good options. GitHub Copilot being one. You've got Cursor AI, Windsurf, all these sort of, but they're all based on VS Code, actually, aren't they? Because it's open source. But why build an extension yourself? Well, yeah, it's part of it is just the doing, isn't it, really? So it's essentially to work with building an extension to have like a chatbot experience in Visual Studio Code. Okay, and I'm going to use Ollama because there are a few others. There is LM Studio from NVIDIA, and if you need to see that, just let me know. And because it's what I'm about to show you will work with LM Studio practically out of the box, like with Ollama. Ollama, if you don't know, is a way of running open source models yourself. Okay, so it's got a standard platform that you can run all these different types of models, and you can see it's got 5.4, 5.5. That's going to be funny, isn't it? When they get to version 5, that's going to be 5.5. That's going to be a difficult one. But you've got all these open source models that, yes, you can run locally, and I'll explain why there's a caveat there shortly. But things like Llama, DeepSeek, of course, and there's lots of other models if we have a look in here. Okay, so there's lots of interesting Quen and for coding and all these other things. Anyway, there's a lot of good stuff. Now you can run Ollama on all the main, as it says there, look, Mac OS, Linux, Windows. Okay, and you can download and run this on your local machines. But if you know me by now, I know I'm not, I'm not an affiliate of Docker or anything, but Docker Desktop especially is my go-to, because you don't have to clutter up your own computer. You can just have these containers running, start, stop, delete, remove, and it's a lot cleaner, I think. So things like I've got Microsoft SQL running on Linux there. As a container, I could get Postgres, MySQL, whatever, and there's thousands, tens of thousands, squillions of images and containers. But the one that we're going to use is Ollama. So when you do look at the docs in Ollama, there's a bit about getting the Docker container, which, like I said, for me personally, I find this really nice because I can update it. It's not, like I say, it's not cluttering up my own laptop, and it's all tickety-boo. Anyway, when you have Ollama running, everything that you can do when you look at the docs, if you've got it running locally, you can do the same in a Docker container. So I better start that up, actually. I'll just start that container. Okay, now, interestingly, regardless of the model you're using, and you can change these ports, it will output a port localhost, in this case 11434. And again, ironically, LM Studio from NVIDIA, if I was to use that, I mean, in some ways, LM Studio's got a nice user interface and experience, but you can still expose the similar sort of, I don't know if it's the same ports, but, the same type of thing. So everything I'm about to show you will work in LM Studio. Okay, so I've already got DeepSeek, and I think I've got Llama 3, but I just want to show you something. This is that caveat that I mentioned, because like I've mentioned a few times, I've got an old laptop. I probably should upgrade it at some stage, but anyway, when cash allows. But anyway, the idea is it's about 7 years old at least. It's an i7, but it's an older generation i7. It's got 20 gig of RAM, and it's still going well, and I'm a bit loath to just upgrade for the sake of it. Although now, with a lot of these AI models needing really good graphics cards and a bit of processing then maybe that's the time to do it. But if we go to DeepSeek, because let's face it, we're on the DeepSeek bandwagon here, everybody's talking about it. But if you ever look, there's loads of examples down here, okay, about what you can do, how you can run it. There's so many combinations, it's mind-boggling, okay. But the key bit is, if you look at the billions of parameters, so the parameters are how the deep learning model is being constructed, how many parameters it's got to actually do all the clever AI stuff underneath. So the larger the parameter set, like 671 billion, billion, they're going to be, what I was going to say, more accurate, but there's more scope, there's more processing power, if you want to call it that. Okay, so but the problem is, if I try to run 671 billion parameter model on my laptop, I think it would pack up and run away to the hills. Okay, and you can also see it's 404 gigabytes as well. Disk space these days isn't so much a problem, but it's the processing power that you would need to run that. So I've picked, at the moment, just to try the test, I've picked the 1.5 billion, still 1.1 gig, but I know that this works, and it works reasonably well. But given what I was saying, that the billions of parameters makes a difference. But anyway, for the purpose of getting this test running, it's fine. Okay, so you can see it's got a command. So when you've installed Ollama, this is how you can run it locally. And ironically, you can do the same thing within Docker. So if I go back to my lovely Docker desktop here, it's running, but it's just running in a container. I can hit these three little dots. Okay, and I can go into a terminal. Okay, let me just drag that across into the screen so you can see it. And I can see that I've got Ollama. Okay, there we are. It's up and running. You could do serve, but it's already running when the Docker container runs. It runs the serve command. So if I do Ollama list, you'll see, there we go. I've got DeepSeek R1, I've got the 1.5 billion parameter, and I've got Llama 3, the latest. Okay, so you can be very specific with these tags. And how you get another model is as simple as this one here. Okay, you can pull a model from the registry. So all of these models, and you'll see they've got the run command. By the way, if you do run it, if you haven't got the model, it goes and does the pull anyway. Okay, so excuse me, that is what we've got, and I've got that container running. It's exposed localhost, so off we go. So let's go into Visual Studio Code, because that's where I'm running now. One thing I forgot to show you, I'll just switch back to the browser, because what I want to do is show you in Visual Studio Code. If you go to the link, I'll put the links in the notes below. To build your extension, I've never really looked at this, and it is quite straightforward to start with anyway. There's some instructions about getting the starter template. Okay, so there's a couple of options. I've used this one down here, basically. Okay, and what it's done in Visual Studio Code, it generated me a template project. Okay, so most of this was generated. I don't have to do much about it. And essentially, we're not going to go through every little bit because it'll take forever. And it is actually meant to be 15 minutes, this. But anyway, but the main thing is you've got this extension.ts. So it's TypeScript, which is really just a superset of JavaScript. So it's really JavaScript with types, you know, things like classes and such, or syntactically classes and such. But the main thing is everything is in this one extensions.ts. Now, if you were doing a proper job, you'd probably split what I'm about to show you out and make it a proper project. But if you don't know about extensions, Visual Studio Code is actually built on like web technology. It's got, I think it uses Electron. If you've ever heard of Electron, it's where it runs a headless sort of like Chromium browser, you know, blah, blah, blah. There's a few layers to that. But the key thing is a lot of the interfacey type stuff is just HTML and JavaScript and CSS. Okay. And yeah, you do need to know a little bit about that. But if I can do this, I can guarantee I can show pretty much anyone to do this. In fact, my cat can actually work, well, nearly, you know, but anyway, it's always, and this is the problem. There's so much stuff. Where do you start? Where do you start to look? And that's the key bit. But anyway, for the moment, we're just going to look at this extensions file. Okay. And what we've done is I've also pulled in, when you go to the Ollama documentation, they've got, as of the time of this recording anyway, they've got a Python library that you can use. But you've also got a JavaScript library, and that's what I'm using, a JavaScript library. There's some good documentation on that, but ultimately it pulls the JavaScript library. There's some node modules. I won't go into it all right now, but ultimately these two things at the top are pulling in the Ollama library for us to talk to Ollama, and then therefore talk to the model itself. And this one's a default where it basically allows you to work with all the VS Code APIs. So open a window in VS Code, do this, do that, show that, you know, interact with this. Okay, so the key thing for this little example is you have these register commands, basically. Okay, and you'll see there I've got one called that. Now that's important because when you look through the documentation, one thing that you do have to do is go to the package.json file, okay, down here, and excuse me, in the commands array here, you can see there I've got a hello world, which I'm not using currently. That was just to start with, but you can see this one here. Okay, so I've got a command called that, but also got a title called that, which will you'll see in a minute. Okay, and what that does is that adds a command. If you've ever used the command palette in VS Code, in fact, let me run this in debug mode to show you what we're actually building. That would be a start, wouldn't it? So if I run debug in VS Code, because it's an extension, what it's done is opened up another instance of VS Code where your extension is loaded by default. Okay, so this is a way of testing it locally. And if you're familiar with VS Code, great, but if you're not, if you go view command palette, there we go, sorry. Yeah, you can see, look, I've got a command chat with DeepSeek. Okay, so if I click that, this is what I've built so far. It's really basic, and it's just opened up in a window. Now, eventually what I'm going to do is a bit like GitHub Copilot, is open up in a side panel, and that means that you can interact with the code and things like that. But just to try it, because I've got this linked up to Ollama in Docker, which has got the DeepSeek R1 model running, I'll just do hello. Why am I doing it in caps? Hello, what AI are you? Now, when I hit submit, this is talking through Ollama to the DeepSeek model. And you'll see the 1.5 billion parameter model isn't too bad. Don't worry about those tags. I haven't quite done my job yet. There you go. It's come back. There's a little bit of duplication because I haven't quite formatted the output yet. But this is actually a response back from the DeepSeek AI model R1 running locally in Docker via Ollama. Okay, so this is what I've built with the extension here. So if we go back, I'll close that out at the moment. So that's what the command is doing. It's registering. Okay, yep, and at the moment, it's just putting it in one column in a window, and it's allowing me to run some scripts that you'll see shortly. Okay, but the key thing is this bit here, where we're getting the web view HTML from get view content. I'll just go down here, and view web content is essentially just a block of HTML and CSS. And by the way, I actually got, just for a laugh, I actually got GitHub Copilot to generate this. So I didn't type all this in. But I thought I'd use a different AI to actually work with another AI, if you know what I mean. Anyway, but as you can see, the key bit, don't worry if you don't know a lot of HTML. It's really just got a text area to put your prompt in. It's got a button to submit, and then it's got a text area to put your response out. Okay, then there's a little bit of script here, but mostly it's to do with getting the event listener for the button, and when there's a chat response back, you know, from the actual model. Okay, but it's not a huge amount of code. Okay, but if we go back, so that's what that's doing there. It's grabbing that HTML, CSS to be able to display. But then we've got an event listener. There, a handler where on did receive message. Well, that's quite straightforward. When a message is received back, okay, sorry, when you've requested a message, sorry, I do apologize, because it's a chat, and that's an important one that I've got at the top. That's like an ID of the chat. It will, I'm just debugging what the prompt is. That's just a way of doing that in VS Code. But ultimately, I'm getting the user prompt, and the magic with the Ollama library is just this bit. Okay, there, that's it. And what you can see is it's going to stream the response. There are a few other methods to do this, but I'm streaming the response back. Okay, Ollama is the library, chat is the method that we're calling, and you can see there, look, I specify the model. Okay, so if I was to show, when I have Ollama in Docker running, you can see, look, there's my model name there. So this is where you can switch in and out any of these models that you've actually got in Ollama. And that's the name there, as you can see. Okay, messages. Now, there's a lot of stuff that you can do with this. These are just the basics. I'm saying it's a role of a user, and the content is the user prompt. So the user prompt was taken out of that HTML when you've typed that in. Okay, and ultimately, I'm just clearing down the response from the previous one. I could add to it, actually, which is probably a better way. But anyway, the point being is I'm then doing a loop to say, from that response, basically go and output that data to that response text area, HTML. And that's it. I say that's it. It's easy, isn't it? But honestly, to get started, it's really not overly complex to do this. I can take you through the details of right from scratch, and I'll probably do that if there's enough people who want to see that. But it is in VS Code, but equally you can write the same sort of stuff as just a standalone little chatbot as well. But the point being is, it's, for me anyway, is about building an extension. There's lots of them. Why am I building it? Well, there's no real reason other than going through the learning experience. So I hope you found it useful. Please, I can't speak English. Please subscribe, like, if you really want to. You don't have to, but it helps the unicorns. Anyway, but have a good week, a good day, and we'll catch you on the next one.